Hey guys, MrFitz. Today I'm in the kitchen and I've been brewing kombucha now for almost 2 years, and today we're ready to start learning about other types of fermentation. So we're going to start learning about making kimchi. So I have just had a meeting, and I got done and came in to check on my cabbage. Online it says you're supposed to put the cabbage in and put one head of Napa cabbage, a quarter cup of salt, and then you massage the salt into the cabbage, and then you cover it with water and let it sit for 2 hours. So I went ahead and got the cabbage in, and it's been in for about like an hour and a half now. So I'm just gonna check on it. So it looks like it's really kind of condensed down a lot. The bowl, the pot was full up to right here, and then once I put the salt in and massaged it in, it was a lot less in here. So that's interesting. I'm just going to add a little bit more water, because I think you're supposed to keep this under the water, under the salt brine. So I decided to host a workshop this afternoon for making kimchi. I don't know anything about making kimchi, but I thought if anybody wanted to come over and learn with me, that would be really cool. So I have one person coming over this afternoon to make kimchi, and so I'm excited to share what I've learned with someone else. So I couldn't find any Korean radishes. I don't know that that's something I'm going to be able to find in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I just bought regular radishes, and I'm just going to chop them up to add to the cabbage. I've already added 1 organic carrot and 1/2 of an organic leek to the cabbage. But first I drained the cabbage, and some things that I've read says to rinse the cabbage, but some things say that you shouldn't rinse it because you need the salt. So I didn't rinse the cabbage after I drained it. I just left it. And so I'm feeling like it's going to take a couple of batches to figure out, you know, what we like and what works for us. So for now, I did not rinse the cabbage, but if it's too salty, I may decide to rinse it next time. So I'm just cutting up these radishes, and you're supposed to put in 1 cup of radishes to 1 head of Napa cabbage. Now I've got some organic garlic cloves. I'm going to chop them up and add them in with the cabbage, leeks, and the radishes. The recipe calls for 4 cloves, and I've got 4 pretty large cloves here, but I think I may go ahead and add extra just because we really love garlic.
Mom, guess what I found?
Nice. Where'd you find it?
It was under the deck.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah, it was right under the office window.
Okay, so I'm using this book called The Big Book of Kombucha, and basically there's 2 recipes for kombucha, or they call it kombucha because we're using the culture I made from the kombucha vinegar to make the kimchi. But there's regular kimchi, and then there's spicy fishy kimchi. And so I'm kind of taking a little bit from both to make the kimchi. The only thing I'm not using is soy sauce. I'm substituting that for liquid aminos. But the difficult thing is that I did research kimchi a little bit on the internet, and as well as like read about it in the book, but there's like all kinds of different ways or different information on the internet about kimchi. This recipe is super simple, and it doesn't call for any type of paste or sauce or anything like that, other than the soy sauce, which I'm using coconut aminos in place of. But some recipes call for some word that starts with a G that's Korean that I cannot pronounce, and I have no idea where I'd even begin to look for that. But I have heard of some Asian markets in Fairbanks, so I might go look for this paste, just depending on how much we like the taste of this, or if we want to experiment with different flavors. I'm also interested to know what's in that particular paste, and maybe I'd prefer to make it myself, just because we are trying to limit processed foods and things like that in our family. So I'm going to be doing some research on that, but for now we're just going to start with what information that I have from this book. So right now in the pot I've got carrots, cabbage, Napa cabbage, so it's 1 head of Napa cabbage, 1 organic carrot, which I may chop up another one and add to it. I've got a cup of radishes, half of a organic leek. Well, I shouldn't say organic. Everything in here is organic. Another thing to note is that we always use organic produce for our fermentation, because it draws out the nutrients, and when you're fermentation draws out the nutrients, and you want the most quality product that you can use or that you can get, because you're fermenting for your health, so you want to make sure that there's no pesticides and fertilizers, chemical fertilizers that have been used in growing the produce to break down your gut and introduce those toxins into your system. So we're using our all organic product and going from there. So right now I've got 1 head of Napa cabbage, 1 carrot, 1 cup of radishes, a half of a leek, and I've got about 1.5 inch piece of ginger peeled and shredded, and 5 cloves of garlic chopped up in here. And then now we're going to add the coconut aminos and the kombucha vinegar, and then go ahead and get it in the quart jars. So I've gone on and added another carrot just because I felt like there wasn't enough carrots in here. So it looks pretty good. And already there's like liquid in the bottom of this pot just from mixing it in and having the salt still on the cabbage. It's just still all making liquid and stuff in the bottom. So now we're going to add the coconut aminos and go ahead and get these in the jars. So it calls for 1 tablespoon of it calls for 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, but we're going to use coconut aminos instead. Maddie, will you get me the kombucha vinegar out of the pantry?
You've been adding sugar.
And then it calls for 2 tablespoons of kombucha vinegar, which I have right here in this jar. To make the kombucha vinegar, you take 1 pint and you put in 2 teaspoons of organic cane sugar and let it sit for 2 weeks. And then you put in 2 more teaspoons of sugar. Let it sit for 2 more weeks and then do it 1 more time. So you have a total of 6 teaspoons of organic cane sugar added, and it has sat for 6 weeks. And then you successfully reduce the pH level and you have kombucha vinegar. So I'm just going to take 2 tablespoons of kombucha vinegar and add to this mixture.
Is that a pickle jar?
Yeah. And then I'm going to find a spoon. Found one. So I'm going to mix all this up. Get it all coated with kombucha vinegar and coconut aminos.
That smells good.
Yeah, it does. And I've got my 2 quart jars right here, and I'm going to go ahead and get this packed into the quart jars. Okay, so I looked everywhere for a kraut weight, which is what the recipe says that I need, but I couldn't find one. What I did find were these fermentation springs and lids from Walmart. I paid $9.99 for a set of 2. And so everything that I know about fermenting tells me that putting a lid on the jars is a bad idea, but you're supposed to cover it with a cloth so that the CO2 can escape. But if you put a spring in, the spring has to have something to push against to keep the cabbage and vegetables underneath the liquid. So you have to put something hard on the top for it to push against. So a lid is the only thing I can think of. But I feel okay with experimenting with these lids because they actually come with a vent to let the CO2 escape, which I thought was super interesting, and I'd never heard of this before. However, I've only been fermenting tea for 2 years, almost 2 years, so what do I know? So you can see the vent here, and I hope that it's okay. I don't really know how to tell if it's not. Okay, it's in there. You can kind of see the liquid starting to come to the top, and so now all we have to do is let this sit for 1 to 7 days is what the book says.
So it could be ready tomorrow.
Basically, I'm gonna let this sit for 2 days and then taste it, and if we like it, then we'll put it in the fridge. If we don't like it, then we'll let it ferment another couple days and see how that goes. So I've got 2 quarts. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention about this is that the recipe says to put this entire recipe in 1 quart jar, but as you could see, there was no way I could fit an entire batch in one of these jars, so I had to split it up between 2 jars. The batch that I did earlier, this is the spicy kimchi. I did not put any carrots in this, and I did put habanero peppers in this one. So this one is for Josh, and these 2 are for anyone who doesn't want spicy. So here we are. We've got the 3 jars of kimchi made with kombucha vinegar, and now I just am going to let them sit right here on the counter and keep an eye on them for 1 to 7 days.